Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This presentation covers the cyber attacks executed against the recently concluded Global Economic Summit that was held by the Five Eyes Alliance. To begin, we will provide a brief overview of the summit itself and the cyber attacks. We will then discuss legal challenges facing Australia when attempting to attribute an attack and when gathering evidence to be used in a court of law. This is followed by an overview of the investigation procedures and processes, which were informed by international laws and jurisdictions. Next, we cover ethics and professional responsibility, which leads into our discussion of ethical and legal conflicts. Finally, we conclude with the steps that were taken to mitigate and reduce damage to the country and its citizens. The Global Economic Summit is a gathering of the Five Eyes Alliance, which is comprised of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The purpose of the summit is to exchange information, primarily signals intelligence. A number of cyber attacks were launched against the summit's information system. Prior to the summit start, anomalous network activity from non-allied nations was detected. Just hours prior to the start of the summit, data exfiltration with an internal source was detected. Once the summit began, a distributed denial of service attack and web server vulnerability scanning were launched against the summit. The last attack on the summit was the Reviton ransomware attack. This attack was the worst in terms of downtime. All the workstations and some of the servers were affected. To varying degrees, the attacks impacted confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the system, resulting in delayed and canceled events and meetings.
One of the largest challenges to overcome with cyber attacks and cyber crimes is attribution. The impacted party must be certain of the identity of the bad actor or actors before making any accusation. Spoofing of source IP addresses and outsourcing to certain groups can greatly increase this challenge. To help ensure attribution is accurate, certain key indicators, such as motive, are used to filter through potential noise and false leads. Australia's view on cyber incidents are that even if a nation or state does not launch an attack, the nation or state still bears responsibility if no action was taken to stop a known attack that leveraged the nation or state's information technology infrastructure. However, other nations will have their own views. Australia is one of the states that has chosen to participate in the Convention on Cybercrime. This convention contains several articles that members must follow. Specifically, Article 23 may be of use when working with fellow members on the collection of data to be used in a criminal case. Unfortunately, even with the binding agreement, each nation's respective laws still may potentially interfere with electronic discovery, especially when personal data of non-involved parties is involved. With cloud technology increasingly being leveraged, cloud service providers are more frequently being contacted for data to be used in criminal cases. Unfortunately, cloud service providers host and store data for multiple parties. Depending on the configurations of the cloud service provider systems, collecting data without impacting the other non-suspected parties may be difficult. The Five Eyes nations understood that the need to secure and defend network assets at the Global Economic Summit would require a coordinated effort. To ensure this effort and other activities were observant of international laws, Five Eyes partners established agreements that align with international law as well as each other nation's respective laws and policies. These agreements enabled Five Eyes nations to work together and organize their defenses and response efforts to maximize the protection of the networks at the summit. When the attack occurred, the Five Eyes nations were able to quickly identify the attack and alert other nations. The Five Eyes partners then combined efforts to form a coordinated incident response, sharing crucial threat information on the malware to include signatures, indicators, behaviors, and initial mitigation strategies. Five Eyes nations then worked to contain the attack within their respective systems to prevent further infections, both internal and external to their networks. Each nation strived to collect and preserve data on the attack so that the information could be shared and analyzed with other Five Eyes partners. Under these agreements, Team Australia was able to analyze the attack and share the results with other Five Eyes nations to develop countermeasures and mitigations. The International Society of Forensic Computer Examiners provides a code of ethics and professional responsibility. This code provides the certified computer examiner with a set of guidelines to follow when conducting digital forensics. These regulations provided us with insight on how to proceed in the digital forensic process at the Global Economic Summit in the United Kingdom. The first ethical and legal question that arises during an international incident is to whose policies do we adhere to? Are we following the laws and regulation of the host nations, or should we follow our own nations, a set of laws that we are more familiar with? In order to mitigate this first conflict and begin the investigation, we conducted an analysis and comparison of international cyber policies and found that many were similar. An international standard could be developed by agreeing nations. To limit legal issues, we ultimately utilized our own nation's policies. The second ethical conflict that arose addressed the limit of the scope of the investigation. This required a limit to be placed on what was accessed during the investigation. The incident opened all the nations at the conference up to be observed to determine the extent of anomalous activity and how the ransomware gained access to the network. While having this access, it would be easy for a nation to abuse the openness and spy on the other nations. It was difficult to determine the extent of access before it could be deemed a violation of trust. If a country were to perceive the investigation was going beyond its scope, it could create an international incident in which collaboration and information sharing would be thrown out in the name of national security. This was avoided by continuously sharing information found with the other members of the Five Eyes. This included everything from results of anonymous IP addresses to how to protect themselves from the IP address associated with the ransomware. Ensuring the investigation abides by both ethical and legal constraints promotes the cooperation of other nations and maintains the integrity of the investigation. In compliance with local and international laws, data that was accessed, shared, or analyzed during the investigation was restricted to threat information only. If the threat information contained potential sensitive or privacy data, it must be obfuscated or removed prior to dissemination. Adherence to the Australian privacy principles while conducting investigations is essential when protecting the privacy of Australian citizens and entities. Compliance with the APP reduces risk to citizens and entities by ensuring the investigations are only conducted by authorized personnel using information that is applicable to the investigation only and disseminated only for official purposes to authorized personnel with a need to know. For Australia and Five Eyes nations, it is critical that digital forensic evidence is collected and handled in a manner that complies with both international laws and the respective laws of Five Eyes nations. To ensure this compliance, sharing agreements were established between the Five Eyes nations that align with these laws. The sharing of information between partners is essential to determine the attribution of the attack and should be supported by the digital forensic evidence. With respect to the attack, information that is collected should pertain to the attack only and must be evaluated and minimized prior to sharing with other Five Eyes partners.